Welcome to Comics with Dan, and it is Christmas time, and something I've never really realized goes well together is Christmas and horror. But if you think about it, it does make some sense, because one of the most popular and, well-liked Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol, and there's definitely some horror elements in there, even if it's not completely a horror story. Well, the comics world is no stranger to combining Christmas and horror, with holiday horror creatures like Krampus making frequent appearances this time of year. So this year, Image Comics, Boom Studios, and Oni Press have all released holiday horror anthologies. Image Comics released Dread the Halls. Hello Darkness number 6 from Boom Studios has a horror Christmas story in it. And Oni Press released Shiver, Suspenstories. So Image Comics also released a Creepshow holiday special. However, I was not able to get a copy of that to read. So I'd like to lay out the other 3 for you and tell you the pros and cons and help you decide which one or ones you want to buy. So Dread the Halls is slightly different from a normal anthology because 3 of the 4 stories are written by the same person who also does the coloring and lettering in those stories, Jordan Hart. Nonetheless, this is a holiday dedicated set of stories that brings the fun and the fear. This story is about Christmas carolers gone wrong. Their carols have this hypnotic power over people. I really liked this story, but it definitely felt incomplete, like a preview for something. I liked the art. It reminded me a lot of Luca Casalanguida, who did the art on The Displaced, which was one of my favorite books of the year. But it also had some like wacky horror stuff mixed in. I like this one, and I want to see more. I don't know if there are plans to continue it, but I would absolutely welcome it. I will say it's possible that this was more of a showcase for Fabio Veras' psychedelic art, which isn't a bad thing at all because it's really good stuff. In this story, 2 kids tried to catch Santa, but not in a playful way, but with a fish hook and a cookie. However, when they think they've caught Santa, they actually have caught his evil brother. Then they go down this road that they are not prepared for. The story was really twisted and built an entire lore around these characters that was like really well developed. The artwork was really well done. It had some extremely intimidating illustrations as well as some creative paneling and really, really great coloring. It definitely had a more classic feel to it, which I liked. Overall, this was definitely one of the stronger stories in the book. I think this was the best story in the book. It was about a sort of loner who's riding his snowmobile on Christmas, reflecting on how Christmas is a time to be with the ones you love, and then he gets into a crash. On his trek to find help after the crash, he runs into someone, an unlikely friend, we'll say. I don't want to say more because it'll spoil it, but this definitely has like a cryptid-esque, story monster in the story, and is actually an extremely touching story. So really like this one. And just look at the art on this though. I reviewed a PDF copy of it, so I need to get my hands on a paper copy for this art alone. The pencil work is just absolutely gorgeous. Walter Pax keeps the natural pencil look, and then Jordan Hart doesn't overcolor it. He adds color sparingly and really helps certain things pop, reminding me a lot of how Tim Sale's art looks in The Long Halloween. As far as inking, I'm actually not even sure if this qualifies as inking because it almost looks like it's done with like a darker pencil or charcoal, but I think it works absolutely perfectly. We'll definitely be seeking out more art from Walter Pax. This was another really fun and intense story. I love the note from the author at the end that stated that this was inspired by his grandmother meeting Krampus and being somewhat scarred from that and wanting to give her a chance to be able to fight back. I just thought that's such a cool idea. And it really puts a whole new perspective on the story. The paragraph came after the story, but I felt reading it with that context made it even better. So I actually went back and read it again after I read that context, and it was even more fun. The story was really just a fight against Krampus, but I love the real-life story behind it. It has a lot of fun action as well. Definitely right up there with Northerners as the best story in the book, for sure. It feels like it's really rare for an anthology to hit on all stories, but this one really did. With the minor exception of Dead Notes feeling incomplete, the whole book was a lot of fun and provided that unique and interesting blend of horror and the holidays. Hello Darkness number 6 is a horror anthology from Boom Studios, and in this month's issue, they included a Christmas story written by Steve Orlando, illustrated by Adam Gorham, colored by Francesco Segala and Gloria Martinelli, and lettered by Lucas Gattoni. There were other stories in this anthology that weren't Christmas stories, so we'll mainly focus on this one, but I'll factor the other stories in when making a final decision. The last story that Steve Orlando wrote for Hello Darkness grossed me out to no end. A story way back in issue number 1 called The Foster, where a hand was sewn onto a man's stomach for later use. This story definitely grossed me out too, but definitely in a way that appeals to what I enjoy in horror stories a little bit more. This story was about a man's revenge on a high school bully, and it relates to the Catalan tradition of the Tio de Nadal, or the Christmas log, where children literally feed the log during the Christmas season, and then on Christmas Eve they beat the log with a stick until it poops out presents. That's not made up. That's a real actual tradition. I'm not one to talk down on others' traditions, but that's got to be one of the more bizarre ones that I've ever heard. That being said, Orlando weaves this into the story beautifully. Adam Gorham's art is really great. Another new face that I haven't seen. Hello Darkness is really doing wonders for getting artist names out there, at least in my eyes. The colors by Francesco Segala are what you'd expect for someone who I consider to be one of the premier up-and-coming colorists in the industry. And Lucas Gattoni is a letterer that I'm familiar with, and he does a really great job here. Shiver Suspenstories is a holiday anthology entry from Oni Press's EC Comics Revival. This anthology easily has the biggest name of the 3 attached to it, with the first story being from Jason Aaron. In terms of the collection of the stories, this has a sort of intro story that actually bookends the other stories, written by Oni Press President Hunter Goranson. I like how it makes it feel like a classic horror book, with the narrator following you through. Perhaps the story is a little more grotesque than I care for, but for some that's not going to be an issue. This was the best story in the anthology, and it's no surprise because it's the one that Jason Aaron wrote. It's starting the anthology out with a bang. It follows an ornament that has essentially spent its life with this old woman, but this woman's children treat her extremely poorly. It follows the ornament's experience with this woman throughout her life, her ups and downs. It's so well written. The art's super well done. It's a beautiful story that takes a horrifying turn, and I highly recommend it. I think it's really cool that they were able to land Jason Aaron to write in this anthology, and if you're a Jason Aaron fan, then you're going to love this story. This was a pretty fun one, and I do like when humor is mixed in with horror, and this one wasn't particularly violent or anything like that. This was a twist on A Christmas Carol, but instead of ghosts of past, present, and future, it was all time travel based with the same guy. The art was pretty good. Peter Krause illustrated one of my favorite books of all time, The Power of Shazam, so I did really like it. The dialogue was funny. All the reactions of this guy meeting different versions of himself was great. A really solid story overall. Really lifts up the anthology. This story was pretty interesting. I can't say too much without spoiling, but a lady steals a silver bell at Christmas time, and the reason why is wild. I did not see this ending coming at all. Jay Stevens writes this book. He writes Dwellings, another series for Oni Press. And it's interesting to see a story that he wrote without his signature artwork attached to it, because he does the illustrating and the writing for Dwellings. But David Lapham and Michael Attia, they do a great job of the art here. Overall, it was a really good addition to the anthology. It was a shorter story, but definitely an enjoyable one. This one was a bit more occult focused than I'm generally comfortable with. Because I'm Catholic, I usually don't want to read stuff that has anything satanic in it. Even though it's obviously shown as evil here, it just makes me uncomfortable. So perhaps that's mission accomplished by the creative team then. The concept of a sort of reversed gift of the Magi, or a twist on the gift of the Magi, is really interesting, but I don't think that this was really my cup of tea. I think it was really well executed by the creative team, but just a little too much focus on the satanic themes for me. A classic horror story from the EC archives, where famous stage actress Willow Dree and her co-star Bradbury Phillips, they go on a trip together and get snowed in. But as with any EC book, there's more to it than that. So it's so classic and terrifying. I love seeing this one in the book. I think one of the highlights of this anthology was having a classic horror story in it. At the end of the day, truthfully, there are promising parts to each one of these anthologies, and there are good reasons to pick up any one of them. Dread the Halls has some of the best stories in this book, and all of the stories hit. Hello Darkness provides some non-holiday stories in addition to the holiday stories, so you get some more variety there, as well as the always clever and brilliant Robert Hack doing I Can't Take You Anywhere. Shiver Suspenstories is curated like a classic horror book, even including a classic horror story. So that's definitely has what it has going for it. If I had to only choose one, I think it would be a close call between Dread the Halls and Shiver Suspenstories, with Dread the Halls taking the edge. So if you're looking for holiday horror this season, any one of these books would be a great selection. But here is my official ranking, with Dread the Halls being number 1, Shiver Suspenstories being number 2, and Hello Darkness being a really solid number 3. Make sure you like the video, make sure that you subscribe, check out my other videos here, and thank you for watching.